Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Eric Mertz.
And this is episode 54 of the podcast, and it's February 9th, 2022, as we record this. Our main topic today is maintaining positivity in your author life. What to do and what not to do.
Right.
The registration is currently open for the Writercraft Writing Retreat and Workshop. It closes April 2nd, so get your tickets now. I wanted to just do a little blurb on Patreon. We have no new patrons this week, but this podcast is sponsored by our current patrons at patreon.com/Valerie Isan. For as low as $1 a month, you can get a shout out on the podcast and we can make announcements for you. At other tiers, the benefits increase: free books, accountability Zoom calls, scene analysis, mastermind calls, and even free Writercraft retreat tickets. Become a patron of the arts at patreon.com/Valerie Isan, IHSAN. Dude.
Those are great perks.
They are great perks. I took a lot of time and thought about what would be valuable to our audience. And I thought those would be them.
Scene analysis. That's after our podcast last week with Jeff. It's, that analytical mindset's definitely helpful, getting in and looking at what you're working on. And
it is, it's really great. Just having other people's eyes and being able to talk shop with somebody. I've had a couple of scene analysis done by other writers in my mastermind group, and it's super helpful just to talk it through and you get new ideas. And I really like them.
Right.
In fact, I'm still reading what I was going to say. In fact, I was working on my book yesterday and, you get the rosy vision of, I hadn't picked it up for a while. And I was like, I just got a couple more passes and I'm good. And then I went through and looked at my notes and there's way more that I need to do on it. And in fact, I'm going to, not now, because I want to do some revision passes first, but I want to do scene analysis for every single scene in the book, which is going to be really long, arduous work. But one of my catchphrases this month that I've been saying a lot, and I think I might keep it for the whole year, is I'm growing as a writer.
I think you always have to be, right?
Yes.
If you think you have it, you're probably going to get stuck.
If you think you're there, you're wrong.
If you're there, you're right. If you're wrong, there's no destination. It's just a journey, I think that's what you got to take with you.
In terms of what I'm reading, I've gotten it back into that horrible place where I'm reading like 5 books at once. So I'm not really super enjoying any of them because I'm just like piecemealing here and here and here and here.
Right.
And I'm not really diving in. So it is time. I do this like multiple times a year. I have to like rein it in and tell myself finish one book, and then you can go to the next one. So
luckily there's a podcast by these 2 writers who talk about how to read like a writer. You should listen to that. And it might help you, figure out how to do that.
Yeah. In case listeners, you don't know what he's talking about, that was episode 52, I think. Yeah, 52.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in that place where I'm finishing a book, and I always get to
reading
that
or finish writing?
Finished reading.
Okay.
I'm finishing the book, One Last Lie. I've been picking at it slowly. I'm also reading Upland Arcana by it's a magazine put together by Mark Teppa, who's a Portland writer. But I'm in that stage where I'm finishing that book, I'm getting to the end, and it's a good book, but I'm doing what am I reading next? I'm distracting myself. I'm taking reading time. Right. So I'm pulling things off my shelf, like, like, oh, that looks great. I can read that.
That's a door stopper.
That is a door stopper. Yeah, that's a big one right there. The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. That's my reading. I was reflecting on that after our podcast. I am the one who's like getting done and trying to figure out how to get the next perfect book started. And so, but that's exciting, right? You're done with one story and you're
the anticipation of the next book.
Yeah, that's what it is. Anticipation.
What else is going on in your life?
Oh, I was going to ask you the same thing. Well, right now I'm completing some short stories. I'm going to do some short stories that link to my paranormal mystery series. I'm doing short stories that are in the one of the secondary characters. I'm doing his backstory in a series of short stories.
Which character?
Sandoval. He's
the writer.
The writer, yeah. And so my vision for this series is that Sandoval and Melville, who are the sheriff and the writer in town, join up as not paranormal investigators.
They're sleuthing, though.
Right, yeah. They figured out that they're the only other person in town that believes in what they're doing, and so they start working together. And I was having so much fun just writing Sandoval's backstory in my head and charting it out, that I thought, well, why don't I just write this as, write a short story? And then it was 2, and then I started mapping out 4 or 5. So I've been writing those short stories now. I
have a question, total digression from our topic today, but I haven't ever written anything short. So when you write short, do you set out to write short? What do you plan to do with the shorts? Are you going to make another anthology?
That's an interesting question.
Are you can you turn a short story into a novel? Can you take a bunch of short stories and turn those into one novel? I don't know logistically, because I've never written short.
I mean, I think that there are some instances where authors do link short stories in a, something, it's sort of like a hybrid between a novel and an anthology. Mm-hmm. I'm certainly writing this as this is where the writer first learns of the paranormal. This is how he starts to investigate this particular, and it's the story world is separate from the strange air. It's not in Canyon County. It's not anywhere. Hasn't met Melville yet. Okay. Hasn't even moved to Oregon yet. And so this is his first taste. And because in the current novel that I'm finishing, Melville is introduced to him as like a writer who wants to write books about the paranormal. Well, this was his inception in that interest. So not skirting your question at all. I think what I want to do with them is I think a short story is, I heard it really well described as it's a single unit of drama around a shattering moment. And
say that one more time.
So there's a shattering moment in a short story. It either happens before the action begins, at the beginning, middle, or end, or after, and you're just following that one beat. Something happens. Here's how these characters deal with it. So I don't. It's hard to say, because I think I know for my own process how to. Here's an idea, and I can take that idea and integrate it, or I can say, here's how I can play with this as a unit of action. And so I try to focus on, here's this cool idea. Let's focus on this character and that, just dealing with that problem. I could expand, I could integrate, but it doesn't have to, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've heard other people say this too, that writing short in between the novels gives you something to either turn to when you're stuck on the novel, or write when you're waiting for representation, or it's at the editor or something like that, and you're just kind of in between projects, or just, as you were saying, maybe that it's just bringing you joy. You really want to know what Sandoval's backstory is, and you really want to write it because it brings you joy.
Right. For me, it's 2 things. And the last thing you said is definitely one of them. Like, I love the exploration of a character. This is a lot of fun for me. But the other thing that it does, if you're talking about between novels, between series projects, for me, I'm writing a 350-page novel in a series, and then I've got it plotted so that the next 350, so you've got these big pieces of your story world, but not everything in your story world is 350 pages or more. It's not novel length. So for me, it's a real relief
Mm.
to acknowledge that some of the incidents that affect my characters are just that short, and it's
Mhm.
it's nice for me to give them that space. It actually liberates the writing for me when it comes to diving, because the next stage for me is a final rewrite on Chasing Shadows, and that's going to be big work. So right now it's like I get to have fun, build
Mhm.
up that energy, and then dive into. I like rewriting, but it's
It's a
hard.
slog.
It's a slog. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm eating my dessert before dinner, if that's, you want to put it that way, and that's fine sometimes. It's, talk about positivity. You
Yeah, I was
sometimes
just going
you
to
need to
say
have that
this is one of the ways. So
right.
when I mean, we were going to talk about downers, things that bring us down, and we were going to talk about self-care and motivation, but also this joy, chasing
Right.
your curiosity and finding joy in what you're doing. And I think that I've also heard that kind of in our space as well, in our industry, that if you are feeling despondent about the project you're working on, you have writer's block or something, you got some feedback from an editor that you didn't like, or something that if you're stuck, how do you kind of get out of those writerly doldrums that we all are in at some point in our author life? And that is or one of those ways is to chase the joy, chase the curiosity, find ways to make writing fun again.
Right.
And maybe that's journaling, maybe it's writing something on purpose that no one will ever see. It's not for public consumption ever.
Right.
And that might, spark up some creativity again. What other things do you do to chase that curiosity or to bring joy back into kind of a space if you find yourself there?
This is a sort of it's a diversion from writing that I do, but writing, it's hard so I think the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that the struggle with writing is that it's a marathon
Mm-hmm.
with an uncertain end. And you might start a book on January 1st, 2022, and which I'm sure some of the people listening did, or somewhere
Mm-hmm.
recently, but you have no idea when it's going to end. Your first draft, eighth draft, submission, all that. For me, what I like to do in that uncertainty is occupy myself with things that have certain joyful outcomes. So like I cook, I take on a lot of the cooking in my house. Every night I set out to make a meal. I get to make it, learn about the process, see people enjoy it. And for me, that I started something and finished it in 2 hours,
Mm-hmm.
that takes a lot of the tension out of writing for me, because the creativity it's quicker gratification. So and a short story has the same effect, like a similar effect. It's like it's a week to get it done, sometimes shorter.
Other ways. So
good.
Joanna Penn talks about having finishing energy, like that starting energy and kind of that middle slog, not middle slog energy. That sounds counterintuitive, but I mean, there's different, you have to gird yourself for different types of work that you're doing on this one big project. Maybe it's the research first, maybe it's the outlining, maybe it's, oh, cool, this is so fun, I'm starting a new story. Other people are like, I hate the starting part of it, it's so scary. I like finishing, because you get all those dopamine hits for checklisting, check marking off the things that you've accomplished and getting it up there for publication, for instance. So I think maybe knowing which one of those are your preferred, energy, what do you like to do the most, and then find ways from your community, from your writing community, how to make those other parts more exciting or joyful or just positive.
It all comes back to positivity. It all comes back to what you do in the seat or standing desk, if you have, or wherever you write. It's all about being, when you're in that space, whatever you need to do that day, can you be in that space to do it? If it's, so I think it's acknowledging the energy and making sure you're, all right, I have to go look, I have to read these editors' comments. I've got to be in a positive space of mind to read these comments and deal with it.
So what are ways that you can get in that positive mindset?
Well, I think you just hit it. One of them is that just acknowledging that it's a different process every time, that there's a different energy for starting. And if you look at like writer stuff on social media, you see a lot of, that whole like joke about writers are writing their novel and it's like, oh, look, a new idea. And they start writing something else. Like, I think starting energy is fun. It's first dates, first kisses, first lines. They're all really romantic and exciting, but you can't live there forever. So I think just acknowledging that. Maybe you can. If you're writing romance, you could just keep adding those.
Well, I don't know if it was Rachel Herron or if she heard it from somebody else or if I heard it from somewhere else and I just attribute it to her, but she is like Post-it note queen, and so whenever she gets an idea, she'll just write it on the Post-it note and stick it somewhere on our computer, on the wall or on the desk or whatever, and then go back to what she's writing. So she acknowledges the shiny new thing and writes it down really quick, but then just sets it aside so she can focus on what she's doing.
Yeah, I think acknowledgement is key. And like that, she's got a process that allows her to acknowledge the idea and then give it a space but not commit to it. I think, you can't just commit to every shiny idea you have.
No, because it doesn't look as shiny when you look back at it sometimes. In the middle of the night, you have this great idea and you write it down. The next morning you look at it and think, why did I think that was a book idea?
Right. Well, what do you do? Like, what is your...
Mine actually starts before the page. I think it kind of boils down for me anyway, self-care. So if I can stay grounded and positive and relaxed and joyful in the rest of my life, then I can bring that to the page. You talked about how to show up with a positive mindset on the page. Well, I think that happens before you go to your desk. So the things that, that comes into knowing what your authentic self needs. What do you need to thrive, not survive? That key phrase that's been going around for a couple of years. And yeah, just knowing what that is for you. Maybe it'll be, for me, one of my strengths on the Clifton strengths, I'm like number one input. And then I also have ideation in there too. And so those especially combined is I want to take in a whole bunch of information and I want to sit and think about it. And so I have to make that part of my weekly, preferably daily, but sometimes that doesn't happen. It has to be part of my lifestyle. I have to fit it in somehow or I start feeling cranky. And so in practicality for me, that looks like daily journaling, just sort of a check-in place where I can kind of think about whatever I need to think about. I really like having a big chunk of time together where I can, plan or brainstorm for my author business or think about new ways to, get more clients or, I need that space where I can sit quietly and do those things in my mind and then journal about them or write about them or, storyboard or whatever, mind map. And I also like being able to start the week knowing what's coming. So having a time set aside, even for like 40 minutes or something like that, where I'm looking through my planner and I'm seeing what's coming up and what I have to prepare for and what I want to focus on for the week. That kind of stuff might sound really annoying to people, but for me, that's what brings me like calmness.
Right.
And if I don't get that on a regular basis, I get kind of frantic. And then that's the energy that I bring to the page. And that's where I start feeling overwhelmed and the anxiety kicks in. And, I feel like I'm a bad writer and I'll never finish this book. And, it just starts spiraling down. And it's all because I didn't give myself an hour to plan this week. So I know that about myself. So, I sit in the hot tub a lot, I try to take daily walks in nature. So there's all these things that I do just to keep myself, sane and happy and healthy. And then I can do better work.
I think you're hitting on something that where that you do have to validate yourself as a human being. You do have to, you're a writer, you're a person who is a writer, not a writer who's a person. And I think that when, especially in an aspirational, I think of writing as like an aspirational pursuit. Like most people don't go to school to become a novelist, then become a novelist, you know, like one would an engineer. So you have to, in some way, most people aspire to become a writer, and they have to find a way to make that work. It's an odd discipline in that way. I think we were doing like engineer craft podcasts. We'd have like 3 episodes because none of it would be about mindset because it's all laid out for you. So I think you have to, because that your writing comes out of experience and comes out of real life for most people, I think you have to, like you're saying, deal with the internal first, make sure that you are the vessel for that creative side, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction or memoir. And then validate yourself here in the process. What I see a lot of people doing, and I think this is a pitfall, is that, well, I'm guessing this is what they're doing, but you see a lot of people using, I mean, social media is like the gremlin everybody hits on nowadays, but I see a lot of people in like discussion groups and rooms and comment threads. I think I sense there's a lot of like people trying to validate their thoughts and their ideas and their feelings in these anonymous public forums that aren't really designed to cultivate that confidence and that balance that you're talking about. So
that's why I really like mastermind groups, because they're smaller and you know everybody in there. And or if you have like a really great critique group, you've got one that you've been in for years, right? Same people. Yeah. And sometimes it's not about the writing, although that's what it's designed for. But, you know, I imagine at this stage, you know, these people well. And, you know, sometimes there's some therapy that might go on in your sessions.
And when they give you back, like I had just as a note to like how that works, you know, I'm working on a book cover for this book, and the first design came and it was not good. I don't want to say anything more than that. But I kept trying to tell myself, this is fine. I can make this work. A few tweaks, and I sent it out to the group, and one of the people in the group thankfully just said, scrap it. That doesn't work. And so those kind of things can get you to negativity if it's not a trusted place. So having a genuine community, somebody you genuinely trust and you can take feedback from, allows you to get that hard hit and not, you know, you don't have to reel from it. It doesn't have to hurt. You just have to hear what you don't like, the bad news sometimes. So, yeah. And stay positive. And right? Stay positive. You can't scrap the project. I can't just say, all right, well, I'm never doing a cover and storm out of the room. I have to go back to the drawing board. And so I think part of being in that pause, I like the way you talk about just that, you know, like you actually had like a criteria where you place in certain tests and orientations personally. I thought that was, and you use that self-knowledge to like, okay, this means this is what I have to do. And it might not sound cool, but that hour of type A gets me into creative, you know, that self-examination is really valuable.
It does. And here's a resource for folks. It's The Successful Author Mindset by Joanna Penn. I purchased the workbook so I could write in it and stuff, but she just has the actual text ebook and print as well. In fact, it's also an audiobook too, I believe. But there is a quote here that I really loved and put a little heart next to and underlined it and put it in the index and everything. And it's, there's stuff that leads up to it that I think is vitally important too. But the quote I wanted to say was, we need to nourish ourselves with the practice of creation, which I thought was super awesome. And a reminder that we're creative people. And well, like John Cleese says, creativity is not a talent, it's a way of operating. So you were talking about being a human and then being a writer. And so I think that we're creative people. Right. It's the way we operate. It's the way we live. It's the way we breathe. It's not it has nothing to do with our talent. It's just, we are creative people. So being able to nourish that creativity in whatever way suits you and works for you, I think is vital to that positivity maintaining that positivity. Yeah.
I think there's sometimes, and I think being upfront about that too, like, if you are that, if you need to have that hour and that's going to help you stay positive, if you're the kind of person that has to carry the notepad around and write their ideas down, if you have to, I think those little creature habits to non-creative people, or to people who are in our lives who, that might become, that might, I don't know the word I'm looking for, like that might just be something that you need acceptance for. And so being upfront in your world and just saying like if you work a job and get a 15-minute break and that's your time to process, just being honest with your office mates and saying, hey, I need this 15 minutes for something else. Let's go have lunch. I think just being upfront and honest gives people the opportunity to validate you. I think that's what when you're doing something that's so personal, it's hard for a lot of people to understand it. Your friends and family want to validate what you're doing. That's they want to be a part of that journey. And so giving them the opportunity to, oh, hey, Eric likes to take his first break writing ideas. Like by giving you that space, they're validating you. And that helps positivity, because now you have people who are, support you by giving you what you need. I always think of the story of Steve Buscemi, who was an actor in New York City, but he was also a firefighter. He's worked at the firehouse, and he never told any of the guys in the firehouse that he was an actor until one of the guys in the firehouse found out. Then everybody in the New York City Fire Department got notice of Steve Buscemi's plays, and a lot of the guys went out to support him because, hey, this is our guy. He's doing something.
My brother, cool. Yeah.
So be open to that support, because support helps you, like, because it's not all going to be positive.
But that's so important, being willing to receive it, I think. And that takes some personal work, because a lot of people are in a place where they just can't accept help. They can't accept support. They don't feel like they're worthy of it, or whatever the reason is. They just don't know how to receive it, or they're out of the practice of receiving it. And being willing to accept that support from your loved ones is a good practice.
And something you just said was, I mean, we're really getting down a different, this is a good path, but I think something you said really strikes a chord for me. And that is like what John Cleese says about you're a creative person. I think you're a writer once you make it your mission. Like once you say, I'm going to write, like Jeff Elkins talked about coming home and writing a short story every day for 70 days and learning the craft that way. And I think the moment you set out to say, I'm going to do this thing, you don't have to have a book on the shelf. You don't have to have a work in progress. You don't have to have that ugly drawer that experienced writers have with stories that'll never see the light of day. You just have to be intentional and say, I'm going to do this. And you can start to work on that process of feeling good about it. You don't have to have a resume to feel good about yourself as a writer.
No, and even if you do have work out there, and if it's getting negative reviews, say, or you've turned your book into the editor and you do get a lot of feedback that, your critique group is saying things that you're not ready to hear, or it's putting you down. That reminds me of another quote that I read in Big Magic, the Elizabeth Gilbert book. Did you read that?
No, but it's somewhere on the shelf in this house.
It's a cool book. She had a lot of cool ideas. And one of my favorite quotes from that was, the reaction to your art does not belong to you. And that is the only sane way to create. So being able to divorce yourself from, as a writer who's receiving feedback to make your book better, you do have to accept that and change and make it better. You do have to take that in. But once it's out into the world, then being able to like let go and stop thinking about it because it's already published, it's out there. Okay, we're done. Next project. And whatever comes back from that, being able to just say, no, I just need to create the next book. Maybe that helps some people step away from the negativity. I don't know, but I really liked the quote.
Yeah, I like the quote, and I like where you're going there. I think that's especially difficult, especially a challenge for self-publishing authors, because you have to be the face of your book so much more. Not that a traditionally published author doesn't have that, is free of that responsibility. But if you're out there and you're cultivating reviews and I talked to someone recently who said, like, I'm out there, I'm working to get reviews, I'm working to get the book reviewed. And then when I get the 2-star review, it doesn't feel good. You worked really hard to get negative feedback, but I think that mentality is, you have to separate yourself from that. You need that in a certain business sense, but you have to separate yourself. You have to acknowledge the fact that it's not, there's nothing that's for everyone.
Yes.
And you have a reader, you have an audience, however niche that is. And when you find them, we are in the process of finding them as independent authors. That's what we're trying to do all the time.
So we're pretty much out of time, Eric. Is there something you want to say about motivation to close it up? Like what is it that you do to stay motivated? Who do you look to? Who do you surround yourself with? What do you do?
Well, family's big for me. I have a 7-year-old, and he's just in this place in his life where like stories are getting big, and so the fact that Dad does that, writes, is like really cool to him. But
by the way, 7 years to 10 years was my favorite parenting age.
Oh, I love it.
So you're gonna have a great couple years coming up.
Yeah. But I always think of that quote, I wrote my first book because I wanted to read it. And I think I've lived in that mentality for a really long time. And my motivation is continuing to stay true to that. I want to continue to honor the fact that I'm a reader and I want to write books that I would want to read. What about you?
I have a few mentors and friends in my writing community and mastermind group that I'm in. Those all keep me motivated and sane. Reading excellent books, that's always motivates me to write. When I read a really great memoir, I'm like, oh, I want to write this book, So
yeah,
I think that's what keeps me motivated. And, also wanting to move to Costa Rica.
There's that.
That keeps me motivated.
Yeah, I forgot about the books. Yeah, you're now part of the other writers community. You're part of that community world. And I just remember reading All the Light We Cannot See, that book. I read that in like 3 days, the fastest I've ever read a big book. And I just thought, I want this. Like that was a spectacular book. And it just reminded me that it's an aspirational field. And we started writing because we like stories. We wanted to write like the authors we read when we were young, and continue to do so.
And I think that that's a really great place. If you don't have a writing community and you are on those forums, the ones you talked about, where they're just anonymous, kind of crappy feedback and you feel worse after reading it all. If you're seeking community and you don't have it yet, one way that you can surround yourself with motivating goodness and support is by finding those authors that you really resonate with their work and looking at their author lives and seeing what they do and try to emulate that, or take a master class from them, instead of going to maybe a big anonymous conference or going to those boards and forums. Spending the time and energy on just one master class that you can learn from one teacher that you really admire. That might be more helpful to you.
Yeah. you said something, and I think it's maybe a great note to stop on. Like if you read those, that's where I kind of was going with that forum idea, but I think you put the cap on it. If you're in a writing community, if you're doing something and it doesn't feel good, it leaves you feeling worse. Look at what you're doing and find a way to get what you were looking for in a different place. If you were going to those forums to find a community and you come out feeling worse, you need to find a different community.
Yeah.
You know, if you're forcing yourself to write, if you are forcing yourself to write 4 hours a day and by the end of it you don't feel good, you need a different process. Do what feels good. That keeps the joy going, because you're not fighting that, you know, the waves, because the waves are hard to maintain. If you can get to that place where you're cultivating a more steady flow, ditch what doesn't feel good.
For sure. And there's tons of people out there that will tell you how to be a good writer and how to be professional and how to be, you know, whatever. But I remember being at a Willamette Writers Conference when Diana Gabaldon was speaking.
Oh, and I was there. I was at the table with you.
Me too. Yeah. Me too. But I remember one thing she said in her keynote about, you know, she'd heard from everyone that getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and writing, you know, for whatever before you go to work. And she was like, that is totally not me. And don't get up at 6 o'clock in the morning if you don't want to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And she's a really prolific writer and super famous, you know. So if she doesn't do, you don't have to follow the standard. You have to find what works for you. I was just trying to give you an example.
Yeah. I remember that part of the speech. She talked about letting her husband go to sleep and like nod off in front of the TV. And that's when she went in and did her thing. And that's right. You got to find what works for you.
You got to find what works for you. Awesome. Thank you so much for talking about positivity with me this morning, Eric.
Thank you. I'm feeling great. Talk about something that leaves me feeling positive.
Yay. Happy writing.
Yeah, you too.
Talk to you later. Bye now.
Bye.